Dogman. No, not this guy. This guy. If you're into the paranormal, sooner or later you'll run across all these mentions, especially out here on YouTube. Dogman is often mentioned in the same breath as Bigfoot or Sasquatch. But what's the deal behind the name? Is Dogman the same thing as a werewolf? Or is it something more? Or less? If you're as confused about this stuff as I was, then stay tuned, because on today's episode of The Weekly Strange, we are talking all things Dogman. So I'm in the process of writing a short film, and in the course of my research, I fell down yet another rabbit hole on YouTube and started seeing all these videos about a dogman. And so I watched a few and just thought, well, that's a werewolf, isn't it? But you can't just write things off as one being like the other, and I really wanted to know more about this phenomenon. So I started doing some more research, and then I started wondering if other people were often as confused about it as I had been, and lo and behold, here's this week's episode of The Weekly Strange. Now, the term dogman was apparently first used by a pair of lumberjacks in Wexford County, Michigan, way back in 1887 to describe a creature they saw that apparently had the body of a man and the head of a dog. From there, the legend grew, with a man in 1937 claiming he'd been attacked by 5 wild dogs, one of which was bipedal. And there were more sightings in the 1950s and 1960s, which built upon the legend. Then in 1994, there were a series of sightings and incidents in Ottawa County, Michigan, especially from one man who claimed to have seen Dogman on at least 3 separate incidents. With its origin story firmly rooted in the stories told by the Odawa tribe that was native to the area, and bolstered by reports throughout the 20th century, things picked up steam. According to witnesses, Dogman is reportedly between 7 and 9 feet tall, with eyes that range from a piercing blue to amber color. It has the torso of a man and head of some type of canine. But what type of canine is always up for debate. Some witnesses describe it as very dog-like, while others say it harkens more toward a wolfish appearance. It is also said to have a howl that sounds like a human scream. Its appearance is usually foreshadowed by a sudden feeling of dread in the people who see it. Sometimes the forest goes quiet, and then that dread feeling comes on. Now, according to some folklore, the dogman only appears like once every 10 years, and especially in years ending with a 7. But others dismiss this notion, saying the dogman appears exactly when it wants to and is unrestricted by the whims of a calendar. And Michigan isn't the only location where Dogman is said to prowl. Dogman sightings have occurred pretty much everywhere since news of this creature started breaking around the time that the internet started picking up steam. These days, you can do a quick search and see that Dogman sightings are in almost every state in the Union, including more than a few up here in my neck of the woods right here in New England. Now, what I find interesting is that the Dogman legend sparked sightings of a similar creature supposedly lurking around the town of Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Author Linda Godfrey even wrote a book about it that launched that particular phenomenon into cult status. She called it the Beastofbrayroad. Now, as I always try to do when I'm looking at cryptids and strange phenomena, I really try to approach these things from a rational perspective. Nothing drives me crazier than when a silly TV show cast members think that literally every noise in the woods is suddenly a squatch. I mean, tell me you've never really been out in the woods before without telling me you've never been out in the woods before. Not everything is some type of unexplained mystery, And more often than not, the noises you hear out in the woods can easily be explained if you have enough experience being there. One of the scariest moments I had in the woods was way back when I used to creep around in them at night, working on certain stealth movement skills. While I was paused for a moment, taking stock of where I was and where I was headed next, I heard this shrieking that really made me jump out of my skin because it sounded exactly like a human baby wailing somewhere close by. Now, once I recovered from the initial shock, I rationally concluded that there had to be an explanation for it. No one had deposited a baby in the middle of the woods and left it there. And sure enough, 5 minutes after I heard the first noise, I see this mama raccoon calmly walking through the forest, followed closely behind by several of her kits who were continuing to wail, presumably because they were hungry. Now, had I not seen that, then it may have remained a question in my mind until I asked around or got, a little bit more experience being out in the woods and comfortable with the noises that are out there. And there are an awful lot of them that sound really peculiar unless you've heard them before. But my point is that these weird sounds that people claim are this cryptid or that ghost or whatever are usually easily explained. Anyway, back to Dogman. I started looking at maps of sightings and wondering what sort of distribution these creatures might have. Could it be the same creature just moving from place to place? Or is it that there are more than one of them? That these are creatures much like the Bigfoot? I mean, if you just look at the map of Michigan, where the majority of these sightings take place, where Dogman is supposed to prowl, and then you take a look at where Elkhorn's Beastofbrayroad is supposed to stalk, it ought to occur to you that there's an awful lot of human population to get through if it was a single creature moving about. I mean, to get from Michigan, you'd either have to kind of come south and then drive north, passing through Chicago and the outskirts of Milwaukee, or else you'd have to head north and kind of come in from the direction of Canada. Neither of which makes sense for a solitary creature to embark upon, which leaves us with the idea that there are plenty more of these creatures potentially than initially thought. That is, if you happen to believe that they are actually some sort of cryptid. Many people do not. Like the Bigfoot phenomenon, Dogman has its own adherents that posit interesting theories about its origin and nature. Among them are the following: that Dogman is some type of interdimensional being that somehow travels to this plane of existence or this dimension for some purpose not yet known to us. Other folks are pretty convinced that Dogman is some type of secret government experiment to blend a canine with a human hybrid. I'm assuming that they think that such a hybrid would make for some sort of super soldier. Or at least perhaps a Customs and Border Patrol agent capable of sniffing out drugs. Could Dogman simply be the government trying to cut back on its canine units in order to save money? So they're creating a combo man-dog thing to do that? Could it? Yeah, no, I know. It sounds nuts, and it's a little disrespectful to the Dogman theory, but sometimes you just have to have a little fun with it. But plenty of people believe it, which isn't surprising given how many silly things people tend to put credence into. A more plausible explanation might be that wild dogs and wolves may have interbred, which isn't unheard of, and a new combination has evolved to walk bipedally. But the bipedal aspect is troublesome to me. Quadrupeds aren't suddenly going to decide that bipedal walking is the way to go. 4 legs gives them a speed and agility advantage that bipedal creatures simply don't possess. There's another aspect to this Dogman story that has some people convinced that this whole craze actually came from a hoax song and not from the reported sightings themselves. In 1987, DJ Steve Cook in Traverse City, Michigan, recorded and released a song called The Legend on April Fool's Day. The song not only caught fire, but people started flooding the radio station with their own reports about the Dogman creature that they claimed to have seen. The song became one of the most requested at the station, and Cook actually sold copies of it, donating the proceeds to a local animal shelter. So did this song somehow make it okay to talk about the actual creature? Were people actually seeing this Dogman in the wild? Or were folks simply getting caught up in the hysteria, so to speak, of the scene? I mean, it's likely a combination of all of those, frankly. People hear about something strange and they want to be part of it. I mean, we have an inherent need to be part of a community, regardless sometimes of what community that happens to be. And the more exclusive the community, the more people want to be a part of it. Now, depending on who you ask, there is a crossover here with the legends of werewolves. Some Dogman enthusiasts think that there's a shape-shifting aspect to this creature. I'm not so sure, because it presents a whole new slew of questions about whether there is a shape-shifting human walking around who is afflicted with lycanthropy in some way that enables them to change into the Dogman. But after researching this phenomenon, I find myself thinking that lycanthropy is less of a suspect for the Dogman than many others. And then there's the fact that the Dogman shares similar characteristics with other supposed cryptid creatures that aren't all that far away from Dogman's Michigan stomping grounds. I already talked about the beastofbrayroad in neighboring Wisconsin, but there's also the Beast of Seven Chutes, which is a cryptid legend from Quebec, Canada, that is reported to look very similar to Dogman. Then there's the perhaps more famous Ozark Howler, which is a comparably appearing creature from the mountains of Arkansas and Missouri, which would be just south. Both states aren't that far technically from Michigan or Wisconsin, and given the swath of sightings that cover much of the entire map of the United States and Canada, is Dogman really just a creature that goes by another name in other regions? When folklore and legends are involved, it's very easy to forget rational perspective and lose the ability to look at things objectively. Much of the area where Dogman sightings are reported were first explored by European settlers with their own rich history of folklore. They were in strange lands circulating with the Native American tribes who had their own beliefs. And as anyone who has ever been out in the woods at night can tell you, it gets spooky out there. In the dark of night, when the fire is waning and the shadows draw long through the trees, ideas that we might laugh off as silly during the daytime suddenly take on an ominous potentiality just beyond the fringes of the firelight. As sightings of Dogman continue to spread and persist, there are claims that the government knows about these things and is doing its best to cover up any deaths that could be attributed to it. For example, a recent documentary on YouTube details the Dogman sightings and interactions in the land between the lakes in rural Kentucky. Now, during the course of this documentary, witnesses claim that parts of this huge woodland area have been shut down in the past as helicopter-borne snipers take out what the government calls feral hog eradication, but that witnesses think is them hunting the Dogman. Areas where people have come across abandoned tents and campsites have been slashed through as if by claws are soon scrubbed almost as soon as they're reported to authorities. And trying to get definitive answers from any government source seems nearly impossible. And when they are obtained, the causes of death for the people that are listed are sometimes unknown animal attack or perhaps suicide. So is there something much more sinister at work here? Something much more potentially lethal? Only time will tell as more research is done into the elusive phenomenon. At the end of the day, whether or not Dogman exists isn't something I can answer. Like many of the things that I look at in the course of preparing these podcasts and videos, the nature of existence is intriguing. Now, certainly physical existence is relatively inarguable once we have a body to examine using scientific principles. But does belief also create experience? Does belief manifest reality? Those are deeper questions that need to be pondered before any answer can truly be established. Legends and myths and folklore and oral tales passed down over generations were created for a reason. Sometimes that reason was to help calm panic over changes in our environment that our ancestors couldn't explain. But other times, the reason was cautionary. Because perhaps there are creatures out there lurking in the night that we still cannot explain. And those legends and folklore that many people laugh at suddenly become the only explanation that makes sense. If Dogman exists, then it joins a growing pantheon of other strange phenomena for the world to research and explore. And if it doesn't, then the stories and sightings are either hoaxes or indicative of something else, something perhaps even stranger than a Dogman. That's going to do it for this episode of The Weekly Strange. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our uploads. And please be sure to check out our other shows on this channel, including The Other Side of Midnight, where I talk to callers all about their paranormal experiences, and The Hunted, where I profile fugitives that are still on the run from justice. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jon F. Merz, author, actor, adventurer. Have a good night.